This week, we discuss GM's new hands-free Ultra Cruise driver assistance system, give our first impressions of the 2022 Subaru BRZ, and talk about why it's so difficult to buy a new car these days and what you can do about it. Next on Talking Cars. Hi, and welcome back. I'm Mike Quincy.
I'm Jake Fisher.
And I'm John Lincove.
So the top automotive news story we thought would be great to start with GM's Ultra Cruise. Last week, General Motors announced its new hands-free Ultra Cruise driver assistance system, which it described as an extension of its existing Super Cruise feature with the added capability of driving on city and subdivision streets and rural roads. The new system will debut on certain Cadillac models in 2023. And I want to really hand this over to Jake Fisher, who spent a lot of time studying this technology. So I'm just going to put it on like autopilot and give it to Jake.
God. No.
He's going to hands-free hand it off.
That's right.
Yes. I'm going to. All right. So yeah, Ultra Cruise, Super Cruise. There's lots of cruises going on. So look, we've done a lot of testing and evaluation of the Super Cruise system, which is kind of a unique system because they actually say you can take your hands off the wheel, but they make sure that you're paying attention by they try to make sure you're paying attention by making sure that you're actually looking where you're going as opposed to your hands on the wheel. So that's kind of a big difference between Super Cruise system and some of the other ones. There's other differences too. But one of the things about it is it's a very conservative system, and they really only allow you to use it on certain highways, so controlled situations. And the complaints of that system often were like, well, how come I can't use it on this road? How come I can't use it in that road? Because you look at something like Tesla's autopilot, and you could use it like anywhere. You could use it, as long as there's some lane lines there. It has a lot more functionality. Now, whether or not it's safe to use it there in those situations, that's a whole nother argument, which we don't have enough time for. Look at the other Talking Cars issues that episodes that we've talked about that. But the big news here is now on top of Super Cruise, there's Ultra Cruise. What that does is that allows the system to be operated in a lot more situations, not just on the highway, but on secondary roads and a lot of that, and really opens it up. In terms of doing that, there is more risk associated with it, right? A highway's pretty controlled environment. You're going around the neighborhood or whatever. You don't know what's driving out, what's coming out in front of you. And there's a lot of, random things that happen, on normal roads. The difference here, though, is, again, they're still enabling this driver monitoring system where it's making sure that you're looking. And I think, just the underlying piece of this is that there is experimentation going on in the world of cars right now in terms of automation. And it's exciting. And there's some things that will make driving safer or more convenient and all types of things. But as long as you can make sure the driver's looking where they're going, the risks really are mitigated. If they allow all this stuff to happen and someone could be looking down on their phone with a hand resting on the wheel, that's where we're really, really concerned.
Now you also mentioned that they're bringing in a new technology called LiDAR. You want to touch on that a little bit before we throw it to John?
Yeah, well, that's another thing. So, for these systems to perform well, they have their own eyes and ears, right? We've got our own senses, and that's why it's important that we're paying attention when these systems are going, because we're pretty good at processing random stuff. Some automakers are just relying on cameras. Some are relying on radar. LiDAR is kind of the best out there right now. Nobody's using it right now, and you may have heard of it because they use it in some kind of like fully autonomous car testing basically right now. But no one in a production sense is using it. They are looking at using that. They will be using that. And that really has a lot more capability than, honestly, you have as a human. You could actually see things in the dark. You could see an object. You're not going to get, fooled when, a black thing is on another black background or things like that. So it could give this car a lot better senses and perhaps better object detection and reaction.
So, John, with all this new emerging technology, are we taking steps forward? Are we taking steps backwards? And in, simple language, what exactly is LiDAR?
Okay, so LiDAR is stands for light detection and ranging, LIDAR. It uses light in the forms of pulsed lasers to measure range, and then it will paint a three-dimensional picture of the Earth, of what the characteristics of the Earth, or whatever objects are ahead of you. That's simplistic.
Let's break it down a little bit. So, we throw out these things: radar, LiDAR, sonar. Cameras we understand, but think about it this way: radar is radio waves bouncing back. LiDAR is light waves bouncing back. Sonar is sound waves bouncing back. They all do different things better. LiDAR is kind of the best in the business right now.
There we are.
There we are.
Is it an advancement? Of course it's an advancement. I still think that until we have vehicle to vehicle and vehicle to infrastructure, all we have is a bunch of individual vehicles with more capabilities doing what's important for them. So right now we have drivers in cars doing what's important for them. This is the same thing, only now you're using more technology to pilot you down the road. So it's great, but if someone's not paying attention and all of a sudden they have to grab the wheel, fantastic that it is alerting the driver. It is Cadillac, or the GM system is telling the driver, hey, I'm bailing out because you're not paying attention. Alert, alert, I'm bailing out. You have to grab the wheel, versus other systems. But at the same time, it's still a bunch of single occupancy vehicles, little pods driving around doing their own thing without any interaction from everyone else. So until that happens, it's an advancement, but it's an advancement of the status quo. If my rant is clear there.
No, I think your rant is very clear because I'm sure the three of us always get asked about, well, when is the self-driving car coming? Is it next week? Is it next year? And our answer, and correct me if I'm wrong, but probably not quite in our lifetime because of all these things, because not all the vehicles have the same technology. Not all the roads and traffic lights are talking to everybody. In its simplest terms, if we were starting from scratch, we probably could do it pretty easily. But right now, not so much.
I was going to say, I could see highway, some kind of, at some point, private highway, because we have private toll roads built, outside Washington, D.C., for example. There's private stretches of highway that people use. I could see them being constructed with sensors. I could see them being, that development coming, again, from private industry versus, local governments, where they have a vehicle to vehicle and vehicle infrastructure communication network set up going forward.
I think the issue is that there's a fork in the road right here, guys. Okay, if you look at what GM is saying about Ultra Cruise, well chosen words, cruise. They're not saying self-driving car version 1, right? They're not marketing this thing as a step towards self-driving. It is not that. And there is a fork in the road. There are automakers that are saying, hey, our goal is, autonomous taxis and all this stuff. There are other automakers, and I think this is an example of saying, we're going to go make driving convenient, easy, or potentially safer. But you're not going away. You are still the driver. You are still responsible. And let us go and underline that point by saying we're not even going to do anything unless we make sure that you're looking at the road because that's your responsibility. So I think we're seeing a fork in the road. And I think what's interesting about it is while we have been talking about autonomous cars forever and that's all exciting, and I'm sure that, whatever your social media feed is saying, lots of things about autonomous cars and self-driving cars, the quest for that is creating technology that is enabling this other fork to do really good things. And I think we are at the beginning of this. And I think even if we have, like you said, vehicle to vehicle technology and infrastructure, it's going to make these things work better and safer and more convenient. But I think you're staying there. You're staying in the driver's seat.
And as Yogi Berra famously said, when you come to a fork in the road, take it. So we're going to be, as Jake says, we're going to be continuously studying this. We've got a great story on consumerreports.org, written by Benjamin Preston. It really breaks down what's going on with this new GM system. So definitely check it out. And that brings us to what we're driving this week. We're actually going to be driving a real car with real technology, not just something up in the air. And we're going to be highlighting the redesigned 2022 Subaru BRZ. This is one of staff favorite, along with the Toyota 86 for many, many years. probably because it has a front engine and rear-wheel drive. It has that good old-fashioned manual transmission that's still available, although you can also get an automatic with it. We rented a brand new model from Subaru, spent some time with it. It's got a little bit more horsepower, up to 228 now. It's still a 2+2 platform, although the rear seat is pretty tiny. There are standard safety features if you get the model with the automatic transmission. Starts about $27,995. And Jake, you've spent some time with it. You'd like to push it around the track a little bit. What did you find?
All right, you're gonna hate me on this because I am going to tell you about what I've been driving for the last 2 weeks, and
it's a bicycle.
In addition to my bicycles, I took a week with our Corvette, which is an incredible machine. Incredible. I mean, it is Detroit's Ferrari. It is incredible what it's so capable of. Then I hopped in our Porsche Taycan, and then I hopped into the BRZ. Sorry, I digress.
I know what you're going to say. Go ahead.
It's just as fun. Mm-hmm. It's just as fun. I had just as much fun in the BRZ that I had in the Corvette. I had just as much fun, maybe even more than the Taycan. I mean, I just miss vehicles like this. Small, nimble, just you feel connected to it. It just packages around you. It's way smaller than the Corvette, but you know what? I think there was a lot more usable room in it, but you know, it's so great that we still have vehicles like this. And they're like, it's such a dying breed, let alone having a stick shift. I mean, the one we rented didn't have it. We will buy one with a stick shift. But I mean, it's like, it's almost like sad that I feel like these things are going away so quickly. I mean, all it's going to take is some electric little sports car, which will not be a manual transmission, that's going to just destroy the BRZ in terms of acceleration and probably handling and all these things. And these things are going to go away. But there's something about it that is just so natural and mechanical and connected that it's just, you can't stop but have a smile on your face when you drive something like this.
All right, John, should we, hand a box of tissues to you too because you're also weeping like Jake, or how did you feel about it?
So look, I like the car with the automatic in the way I drove it. I drove it around it was a rainy day, first of all, and fall, we have leaves on the ground, so drove it judiciously. But the automatic was nice in the curvy switchbacky roads that I drove around the East Haddam, Colchester area, the Lyme, Connecticut area, because, when you're cutting back, it's much easier to just pop the paddle than getting in and out of, gear changes on some of these narrow roads. It drove very easily. It didn't have the automatic of yore where, a big bog down. I mean, it was a quick shifting automatic, conventional automatic. And I agree with Jake with that. I mean, look, we're in an era where a Porsche Cayenne is setting Nürburgring records. We're the 1988 sports car in my garage is slow compared to a Hyundai Santa Fe hybrid. Probably, it's the era of performance is insane. It's almost the Group B rally car era of just obscene horsepower. But those were on the rally circuit. I mean, these are cars on the street. So yeah, I agree. Just like. And Jake, Mike, you remember the Porsche dropped off a 992 that we drove, the current generation 911. It just gets worse and worse each generation because you can't enjoy that car anywhere. It's a huge car and it's so capable, but you're driving at 30 miles an hour. You have more fun, just like we talked about Miatas, more fun going fast in a slow car than slow in a fast car.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it is great. And I look forward to having the experience driving it. It doesn't fit my lifestyle. I mean, I have a fun car. It wouldn't be my car, my primary car. But I've had students at track days with they don't have a GR86, the new one. They have had a Toyota 86 or even an FRS or a BRZ, the Scion FRS, if you will. And yeah, they may give up horsepower on a main straight, but they're going to dog somebody through every turn, and then, yes, the fast car will blow by it and then they'll dog them through the turns again. And, that's the beauty of a car like that. So yes, kudos to Toyota and Subaru for continuing to invest in that. It is a dying breed. Everyone can GT3 RSs are fantastic cars in their own right, but these are great and they're attainable, and and they have a manual transmission, which not all those hyper performance cars offer anymore.
I have to say, up until just a few years ago, I always had at least one car in my house with a manual transmission, but I had the opportunity to drive this rented BRZ on the track with the automatic. And I felt like I really got everything out of that car. It always seemed like, even with the automatic, it always knew which gear to be in. I was out there with Anatoly the Great shooting the B-roll that you're probably seeing right now. Got a chance to really push this car as hard as I could, and I felt like I got the most out of it. Jake, I'm totally in lockstep with you. To get the capabilities, the limits of the Corvette, it takes a lot of work, and the limits are so high it's almost scary. So get into a BRZ, get into an 86, and you'll feel like a champion, as opposed to a Corvette or one of the high-end Porsches, where you really kind of got to be on your game because of the limits are so high. And I love this car. The three of us have had many opportunities to do track days, and I have to say that more often than not, a BRZ or an 86 is almost always in my top 5. And so again, like you, John, I look forward to trying out the model that we're going to buy with a manual transmission. I talked to Gabe Shenhar, and he assures me that we're going to be buying both the Toyota GR86 as well as a BRZ and a manual transmission. And Jake, you and we all three of us know how kind of a long-standing relationship we have with these cars, because we found a way to integrate them into some of our testing program.
Yeah, that's right. Actually, we use a couple of the last generation versions of these vehicles to do in our tire test program when we look at high performance tires. And they really are great test mules for the tire test program for a couple of reasons. One is, they're so connected and in great steering feel that you could feel like the nuances of different tires and how that adjusts, impacts steering feel or ride comfort and noise and whatnot. The other thing is that they're very reliable vehicles, and you could push them to the limits like all day long, and they just keep on going.
So stay tuned. We'll have more on these models as we buy them for our testing. So before we move on, we just wanted to take a moment to let you know about the Talking Cars donation program. If you're not aware, Consumer Reports is a nonprofit organization, so all the work we do is funded by memberships as well as donations. If you're able to give, it really does help keep us doing the work we do, including this show. You can find more information at cr.org/give Talking Cars. Any donation is helpful. It all adds up, so we do really appreciate your support. And now we are going to move on to one of my favorite sections, the questions. We love your questions. Text 30-second videos. Send them all to talkingcars@icloud.com. That's talkingcars@icloud.com. And first up is a question from Roger. When buying a new car, it's always recommended that you test drive at least 3 different cars. But if I can't find any of the models I want to try on dealers' lots, thereby requiring a pre-order, what strategy you suggest that I do? So this was a great question. We almost thought about, leading this podcast with this question, because it really gets down to the heart of what we do here at the test track, and that's buying test cars. But John, I'm going to throw this one to you.
Yeah, it's certainly a real challenge, and it kind of speaks to a couple of things. So one is not waiting to replace a car until you're desperate straits and you need one, because in normal times you're making a kind of a compromise decision when you're desperate. Now you have no opportunity really to test it. There's a couple of things. I mean, look, go through our reviews. I mean, because we are driving the cars, we are living with the more pedestrian mainstream versions of them, not the RSML type R version that is in all the automotive media. In some cases, it's a situation where, like, look, if you can't drive it, then you have to drive the best one on the lot. If the one's not on the lot, then that's up to you. Chalk it off, cross it off. Unless it's something you really think like, okay, look, it tested well. It did, Hyundai Palisade, Kia Telluride, for example, very hard to find. They did very well. They do come, dealers are putting premiums on them. They have a history. They have reliability history. They have good reviews. You could probably buy that with confidence. If it's a first year model and they don't have one and it's from a manufacturer that maybe doesn't have a great reliability record, you may want to take all that information in and say, look, historically, first years aren't great. Why don't I skip that model and buy something that it may not be as exciting, but it has much more, information behind it. But going forward, it is a situation where you're going to see this potentially more and more, that, dealers are more delivery centers, and they're not the place where you walk in and pick up a car and drive home that same day. And it's going to be an ordering process. It's going to be like the Ford Maverick that we have, or the Rivians that we have ordered. You have 6 months, a year, whatever it is, you're putting in there, you're speccing the car out. It's going to make negotiating a different story, and it's going to make the dealer model a whole different story as well. So it's a scary time. It's an exciting time. But as far as advice, get to your comfort level, use the data that you have out there, and then make your decision from that.
Interesting that you brought up a Telluride. A friend of mine ordered one. She said she's not going to be able to get it until next spring, believe it or not. I mean, Jake, we've just never seen like the automotive retail market like this before.
Yeah. I mean, it affects us too. I mean, sometimes we have a car and program and it's like, well, it's not available yet. I mean, we don't have to test drive it before we buy it. We have that kind of luxury. Fortunately, we could do that afterwards. But the one tip I would go add is, it is on my mind because, I got a senior looking at colleges, and it's not like a car dealership, right? There's 3 Honda dealerships within like 20 minutes from me. I don't have to go there to test drive the vehicles. Just like, for my senior, he doesn't have to just look at colleges that are within 20 minutes from us. I mean, we're doing road trips. We're going 4 hours and checking out this place. Do that. If you could find the car that is on the lot and it is a state away or 2-hour drive, this is a big purchase. Go drive it there. You don't have to buy it there. They understand that. You test drive the car, fine. It's an hour drive away. You test drive it. You could buy it at your local dealership. And there's 2 ways to do that. I mean, one, you could actually try to have the dealership kind of like trade. They'll give them something. They'll actually transport it to your local dealership, or you could order it from your local dealership. If you'd wait. But if you're just worried about like I want to see this thing before I plunk down 30 grand. I get that. See if you can find the location. I mean, the websites are terrific. You could locate vehicles in neighboring states, and that is one thing that might work.
So we're definitely waiting for a number of vehicles for our test program. So it's a tough time to be a car buyer right now, and if you're a car seller, well, you're doing a little tap dancing yourself. Anyway, great question. Thanks, Roger. Next up is Kevin from Cincinnati, Ohio. My daily commute is 120 miles round trip, with the majority of that being highway miles. I was recently comparing EPA and CR fuel economy data for gas-powered vehicles, as well as hybrids. While I've always known there are differences in each organization's testing methods, I'm quite confused as to how hybrid city fuel numbers are often significantly different. In fact, typical EPA ratings indicate hybrid vehicles score better in the city than the highway, but CR's numbers say the opposite. What could account for this discrepancy? So, I mean, Jake, you have worked for both in industry as well as Consumer Reports, so I'm going to ask you to come up with the best answer for Kevin.
Yes. Well, I mean, when it comes to city and highway fuel economy, I mean, it's almost a misnomer. I mean, our tests are very different from what the EPA is doing. I could take you down a little bit of what the EPA is doing, what we're doing. I mean, when it comes to city, what the EPA is doing is a very, very gentle cycle. I mean, imagine you're driving the car and you're barely touching that gas. You're accelerating really slowly. I know if I'm in a city, sometimes, the light turns green, I'm accelerating pretty quick. Or if you're trying to get into traffic, you're accelerating pretty quick. There's not a whole lot of it in the EPA cycle. And that's why those EPA hybrid numbers are really very high. Now, when it comes to highway, the EPA cycle is a bunch of mixed driving. Some higher speed, some lower speed. Our test is actually really simple. 65 miles per hour straight on a highway. Very, mostly flat. So if your commute is you're going 120 miles and you're mostly kind of like cruise control at 65, our number is a pretty good number that you could rely on. That's very typical what you're going to get. If it comes to a city, I mean, unless you're like hypermiling it, you're really working at it, you're probably not going to get numbers close to that EPA estimate. You might, ours might be a little bit more aggressive, it might not be as low, somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, that's a great answer, and John, I know that we tested, for example, the Ford F-150s, especially the hybrid model. We definitely came out and said, gosh, the hybrid, for all the hype of its fuel economy, those numbers really didn't add up to what Ford suggested they might be.
Yeah, that's right. Look, like Jake said, the variation in the testing methods comes through. But again, one of the nice things I think also that you see on the EPA site is that consumers put in their own information. So you can see what people are getting and how they match up with, with their numbers as well. So number of things that I've seen on there looking at it, it's a lot of people put in their numbers, and there is that variation, and oftentimes they do come down a little bit more towards our numbers on the city fuels, on the city cycle. But again, different tests out in the street, out driving it versus in a lab, you are going to see some differences.
Excellent question. Thanks very much for that. And we got to wrap this up. We got a question. This is DK from Tampa, Florida. Following up on your EVs for tall people question from a recent episode, the models mentioned all have glass roofs, seemingly to aid with headroom. I'm tall as well and wonder how safe these all-glass roofs are in rollover collisions. Aren't vehicle structures designed to transfer accident forces through their floors and roofs? So John, you looked into this answer for DK, right?
Yeah. So when the roof crush rules were worked on in the early 2000s, the roof strength rules, they actually the government tested a Scion TC, a Cadillac SRX, and a Ford Edge with the large panoramic roofs. The roofs shattered on the TC. The panel didn't fail in the SRX. But the quote here, from the government documents, after review of the load deformation curves for both vehicles, test results showed the effect of the sunroof was insignificant to the overall strength of the roof. Basically, yes, the energy is being transmitted not the roof of the vehicle, but into the rest of the vehicle, like the gentleman's asking in the question. But the pillars, think back to when you were little. If you climbed up on your car, your dad or your mom was like, get off the roof, you're going to dent it. The roof is not the integral piece that's supporting all of the weight of the vehicle. It's and again, go to the automotive manufacturer marketing materials, the high strength steel used in the A and the B and the C and the D pillars and the roof pillars, and it's transmitting for that's where the energy is being absorbed. It's not, just because Volvo stacked a ton of cars on, a bunch of cars on each other as a show of strength, it wasn't the roof that was holding them up. It was the entire, body, the body in white, et cetera. So, I wouldn't worry about it. Yes, you're going to possibly see glass breaking. There's an issue with that. We have seen that some manufacturer, roofs have actually just exploded. That has been an issue with panoramic roofs, and we did a story on that a couple years ago on consumerreports.org. But as far as in a rollover, it's the more of the vehicle than just the roof panel. Jake, I know you have some thoughts on that.
I was going to say we need to raise the roof and give it to Jake.
Wow. Yeah, John's totally right. Anyone who has ever stood on the roof of their parents' car and there's kind of oil tins in there, the roof is really thin metal. The strength is kind of like a halo around you,
This is coming from a guy that grew up with a lot of Volkswagens, right, Jake?
Well, the whole car kind of oil cans, the fenders, the hood. When you open it up, it all kind of flexes. Yeah. But it's not the thin metal. It's the structure around it, like a kind of a halo around you is a good way to think about it. And in some ways, the glass done right. Some of the better roofs they're laminated glass like a windshield. And that actually is going to be a whole lot more structure than a thin piece of metal. Think about your windshield. The windshield itself is actually a structural member. It actually, if you took out the window and put like a thin piece of metal like your roof, well, first of all, you'd crash a lot because you wouldn't be able to see. But beyond that, it would be less safe. It wouldn't have as much structure to it. So done right, it's not going to hurt you.
Well, that about do it for this episode. As always, check the show notes for more information on the vehicles and topics we discussed. Just a reminder, keep your questions coming to TalkingCars@iCloud.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you next week.